Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a video for you about dedicated servers in Black Ops 3 and how they should be handled. This isn't an Intel video, this is a suggestion video for anybody at Treyarch that's listening, or for all of you guys if you think this is a good idea or not. The gameplay that you're going to get to see is me using the Scorpion Evo on the map Takedown. I send these kids to Shrek Swamp and I make sure they stand there. They get Shrek the whole game. I think I'm like 1 or 2 kills off a nuclear near the end of this game, loop my streaks, I don't know how many times. But dedicated servers have been a problem in Call of Duty for the last 2 Call of Duty games. The problem with them, or lack thereof in this case, is that we're promised dedicated servers, but we have no way of knowing if we actually get them. Dedicated servers have actually been in Call of Duty games since Black Ops 2. Black Ops 2 used them a little bit. They were kind of buying the servers and putting them online before Ghost launch and testing them out here. And I think one season of League Play actually used dedicated servers, but nobody knew that because there was no way of telling. In the same kind of way that Ghost was advertised as being the first Call of Duty game to ever have or use dedicated servers, but I have no idea personally, experientially, if they had dedicated servers or not. Of course they said they did. Lots of reputable people told me they did, not only at the studio and the devs, but my friends that had advanced networking software and Cain and Abel and some other interesting tools said that Call of Duty Ghosts had dedicated servers and they were up and running and active, but I never saw them. As an end consumer with a regular router at home that didn't have any fancy equipment or any sort of know-how, I had no idea if I was playing on a dedicated server or not. I mean, there was just no indication in-game, so I personally can't say. Now, when Advanced Warfare rolled around, dedicated servers were much more heavily advertised. I also upgraded my software and hardware in home, so I can do a lot more interesting things with my network, and I can see what server I'm playing on every single time in Call of Duty. I can see if it's dedicated, I can see if it's P2P, I can see the location, I can ping it, I can do a lot of nice things, and I can see that now, and I know that Advanced Warfare has dedicated servers. I know where they're located, what their pings are, and a lot about it, but if I didn't have all of this fancy equipment, I'd have no idea. There would be no way for me to know because the game doesn't tell me. And the question is, why would the end consumer need to have all of this equipment to know that one of the marketing promises is working? And the answer is they shouldn't. They shouldn't need all of this complicated stuff to know that they're getting what they paid for, and one of the things that they paid for is dedicated server. They shouldn't have to bust their hump and learn all these complicated marketing terms to see if they're getting that. And this is where my solution comes in. It's a relatively straightforward one. I think it's a good one, but there could be some drawbacks. The problem is that all of the matchmaking stuff, all of the lag compensation stuff, all of your connection stuff, all of your host stuff, all of that happens behind the scenes in Call of Duty. That's all closed doors. That's not, even if you're playing the game, you have no way of knowing this information, and that's where my solution comes in. I think that if you're playing Black Ops 3, you should have an indicator. I'm thinking probably in the scoreboard, like when you load into the game, you can hit the back button and you can see, it'll tell you if you're playing on a dedicated server or not. I think that would be a fantastic thing. Now, I don't think I would put it in the loading screen, like where it's loading and it says dedicated or peer-to-peer, because I think people would probably back out or turn their consoles off. I think they'd be more willing to play when they get in the game. But it would be nice if you could check when you're on a dedicated server. It would say, you know, like you load up, you hit the back button, you see your score, your bars, all the teammates, and you see, oh, I'm playing on dedicated server number 329, which is located out of Dallas, Texas. I just picked that. That's close to where I live. And that would be really nice to know. That would make me as a consumer more confident. It would make me happy to know that I'm getting what I'm paying for, and it'd be a lot less confusing. Wouldn't have to use all this fancy equipment to see that. I also think it would be really cool if you could see the location of the server. It'd be nice to see if you're playing on a dedicated period. It would be nicer to be able to see if you were on the right location, like where your server is based out of or something like that. That'd be pretty cool too. Probably wouldn't show the IP. Showing the IP would just be like asking for people to DDoS the server. Unfortunately, there are some downsides to this, and this kind of relates to human behavior and psychology. If you knew whether you were playing on a dedicated server or not, that would change how you play. If you were playing on a server that you knew was a peer-to-peer connection that somebody else was hosting, you would probably blame your deaths and user experience on the lag a lot. Or what I'm really more worried about is that if you saw that you weren't on a dedicated server, you would quit and go into matchmaking again and do it again and again and again until you were definitely on a dedicated server. And then if the dedicated server didn't play like you wanted it to, if it didn't meet your expectations, you'd still be angry about it, because newsflash, dedicated servers can still lag. I've argued with tens of thousands of people that have told me that it's impossible to lag on a dedicated server because Magic, apparently, they're just regular servers. They're just not a person's house. They won't be inconsistent. They'll be the same thing for everybody. They might be a crappy same thing for everybody. They'll be the same thing. Typically much better though, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. But if they still don't like the dedicated servers, then they might not just play, which would be a big problem. Or if you gave the location of the server, you might know, like, hey, you know, I live in Kansas. Why in the hell am I on a New York dedicated server? I don't like that. That's too far away. Even though the ping between you two or the trace route might be fantastic, that geographical distance might be scary. The end consumer might not like that. Or if you're playing out of region in, say, Australia, New Zealand, Uzbekistan, Siberia, something like that, there probably aren't going to be dedicated servers in these regions. I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know where every single one of them are, but I can't tell you how many people have sent me very angry or frustrated messages on YouTube saying they never get to play on dedicated servers, or they aren't in your region. And I'm like, well, what's your region? And they're like, the Democratic People's Republic of the Congo. I'm like, oh, that's probably because like 15 people in the Congo have Call of Duty, and it's not even safe to put servers out there. You can't do that. And I know they're very frustrated about it, but as a consumer, it's all about meeting their, you know, demands, expectations, and that sort of stuff. So it doesn't really matter on there, and it doesn't matter how impossible or impractical the demand is. It's just there. So that could be really frustrating depending on placement, budget, all that sort of stuff. And there are definite downsides to this idea, but I do think that the core idea of letting people know whether or not they're playing on a dedicated server is good. I'm just not entirely sure about the implementation. Another one that a lot of my friends want, and I do too, it makes total sense to me, is to add ping numbers into the game. Why do we have like cell phone bars instead of ping numbers? That's been the same in I mean, I know why they're there. It's because the idea was back in the day that console gamers weren't savvy, or they weren't sophisticated, or they weren't ready for ping numbers. You know, back in 2005 or 2006, when like this newfangled internet on consoles or multiplayer gaming on your living room TV was a radical idea, maybe we weren't ready for it. But now, in the modern world, where the most popular games are super light PC games that anybody can play, that you can get ping numbers at other console games, show ping numbers, we have stuff like that, ping numbers should come back in. Obviously, they should also be separated from the scoreboard so as to not be confused with score, but the bars are kind of confusing because each bar is like 100 milliseconds. There can be two different 4-bar connections and like 80 milliseconds of connection between them apart, and that's kind of a big deal. It's just really not a great user experience. The ghost route was kind of crazy. It was a bold move on their part to completely remove those so that people wouldn't blame their deaths on lag or differences in ping and things like that, because like 10 millisecond difference in ping is not going to get you killed. You're going to die because you're not playing the game very well. But the idea was to remove it so people weren't focused on it. It kind of worked for the most part. People didn't focus on connection. That game actually had fairly decent connection anyway. But it was frustrating for people that were curious as to why they were lagging, that had no feedback as to what's going on. Guys, that's my idea about dedicated servers in Call of Duty. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe, and tell me what you think about it. Drifter out.